You are listening to a pleasure podcast. For more from our Sex Podcast Collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome back to Private Parts Unknown, a podcast about love and sexuality around the world. I'm Courtney Kosak, and privates, today we are learning to say two of the most difficult words in the English language. I'm sorry. Oh, it's hard sometimes, isn't it? It's certainly not sexy, but this conversation is super relevant to relationships of all stripes, and I think we could all benefit from this episode because most of us have something we could afford to apologize for, and most of us have a grudge or two we're carrying around, whether or not we would like to admit it. But don't worry, today's guest is here to help. We have author Sue Shapiro in the house, and she is sharing takeaways from her latest book, The Forgiveness Tour: How to Find the Perfect Apology. Basically, Sue had a situation where she felt wronged by someone close to her who would not apologize, and it sent her down the rabbit hole to explore all the different complexities of forgiveness and apologies, and we are all going to benefit from her insights. But before we get into it, just a friendly reminder that August is Marie Mer Month on Private Parts Unknown because, hey baby, August is hot as hell and y'all need some lingerie to match. And while it is super fun to buy Marie Mer for yourself, I have done it, and let me tell you, it is satisfying. It is also very satisfying to receive as a gift. So I am talking to you, boyfriends or partners of any gender. Get your girl some Marie Mer, okay? If she likes sexy ass lingerie, and I am talking BDSM and bondage inspired leather and latex and fishnets and bodysuits, this will be a gift for both of you. It is guaranteed to spice up your sex life. So head on over to mariemer.com by using the link in the episode description and use code PRIVATE for 15% off. All right, here we go.
I'm Susan Shapiro, and I'm the author of many books my family hates, including most recently, The Forgiveness Tour: How to Find the Perfect Apology.
So give us a short little description of the Forgiveness Tour.
Yeah, so what happened was that I've written before about a very close confidant, an addiction specialist that I work with for many years who helped me quit a lot of addictions. In fact, he's the subject of my earlier Random House memoir, Lighting Up: How I Stopped Smoking, Drinking, and Everything Else I Loved in Life Except Sex. And there was a certain point where something happened and I felt totally betrayed, and I felt like he just really screwed something up badly. And I told him he owed me an apology. And he said, "I'm sorry for the imaginary crime you think I committed," which made me want to commit a real crime. And I just couldn't believe it. And we had a huge falling out. And he had been my closest confidant for maybe 15 years, including kind of like a sponsor because of the addiction work. And he had helped me get married and helped me sell books and stuff like that. So it was really like I needed a shrink to help me deal with my shrink. I was really like flipping out. And the thing that stayed with me was I never thought of myself as someone who held grudges, and I really just wanted to forgive him and get over it and move on.
Right.
But I couldn't get over, he wouldn't admit he did anything wrong and he wouldn't apologize, and I couldn't get over it. And it just kind of blew my mind. And just because I don't think I'd ever been in that position before. And at the time I was working at Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen. So I talked to the Reverend there about, can you forgive someone who isn't sorry and doesn't say they're sorry? And then I asked my rabbi, and I just got on this huge journey to kind of understand more about apologies and forgiveness and why I was so stuck. And I went to a lot of religious figures and a lot of doctors and shrinks. And then I wound up interviewing 13 people who had wrongs that were really never righted. Sort of asking them, do you ever get over it? If you don't get the apology you need, or you don't get the reparation and, the acknowledgement, how do you get over it? And that's how the book started.
So the book is dedicated to your dad. How did he play a role?
Well, what was interesting is I didn't think he did it all at the beginning. The book took 10 years to write and finish and publish. And what was interesting is that the doctor in the book, who I call Dr. Winters, was definitely a father figure. He was an older shrink, very smart shrink, who was a Leo like my father. So it started out where I was having a huge falling out with my father figure because my father and I had a complicated relationship where my father didn't really like my writing. He didn't like my career. And so that caused that, even though we loved each other, that caused a lot of frustration and friction between us, since that's what I dedicated my life to. So what was interesting is in the course of the book and over the course of 10 years of writing and rewriting and figuring out the whole thing, what was weird was that after I sort of lost my father figure, I kind of got my real father back. And he wound up,
Uh-huh.
we wound up getting closer, and he wound up illuminating a lot of, a lot of the issues I was having. So, yeah, my dad wound up being important to the book, which I didn't expect.
That was a very validating postscript that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it surprised me. It surprised me. And, in some ways, I've written books that haven't taken that long, but in some ways, the fact that it took so long was good because a lot of loose ends got tied up.
Yeah, totally. So, obviously, listeners need to read the Forgiveness Tour to get all of the nuance, but you have a really great appendix that offers ways to find the perfect apology. So, I would love to hear your Cliff's notes of how do you give an apology that's effective?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I learned in doing the book and asking, not only experts and religious figures and shrinks and doctors, but also asking the people that I interviewed, what apology did they want that they never got? I learned a lot about the importance of a great apology, and there were a couple books that I quoted. So really, there's 4 elements of a great apology. So one of them is saying, "I'm sorry for screwing up," and really explicitly saying what you did wrong, saying how and why you'll never do it again, giving an explanation for why it happened, and then offering some kind of a reparation. And so I think
Huh.
one of the things that happens a lot of times is that even myself, I realized later I was giving very half assed apologies. So I would say something to someone like, "Oh, I'm sorry if I hurt you," or "I didn't know you were so sensitive," or "I didn't know that bothered you." So those are all really sucky apologies. So it's funny, people always ask me after spending 10 years on the forgiveness book, did I become more forgiving? And I would say, no, I didn't become more forgiving, but I did learn how to give a really, really good apology. So basically, if somebody's hurting, you did something and you want to fix it, you really have to fall on your sword. So it's no longer a discussion. You don't get to say what bothered you or why you didn't apologize or what your confusion was. You really have to come clean if you want to reconcile. You really have to come clean and say, "I screwed up. I'm sorry. Here's what I did wrong. Here's why it happened. Here's why it'll never happen again. And let me make it up to you. How can I make it up to you?" So that was a really good thing to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Sue just gave us the 4 elements of a great apology. So let's recap here.
Saying, "I'm sorry for screwing up," and really explicitly saying what you did wrong, saying how and why you'll never do it again, giving an explanation for why it happened, and then offering some kind of a reparation.
All of that is super helpful and I think boils it down to the main essentials. But I just want to double click on this appendix for a moment because I found it to be 3 of the most life-changing pages in the book. It's called Ways to Find the Perfect Apology, and these are the subheadings. Explore what went down, express your hurt on paper and say what you want, decide if something else can compensate, can actions substitute for words, let the person know they are forgiven, find a forgiveness surrogate, take it public, ask advice from mutual friends and colleagues, try to view the estrangement as a mystery, not malice. I love that one. And apologize yourself for something you did wrong, which, yes. If we're all looking for an apology, we should all find an opportunity to apologize for something we have done. So anyway, I love this appendix. I love the entire book, and it's a fascinating read. So make sure you pick up the Forgiveness Tour for all these details and more. Okay, back to the interview. And I mean, it sounds like you don't always need to give an apology. What did you learn about when it's called for versus not?
Well, one of the things I learned that's really interesting is that I was quoted in a New York Times piece that actually quoted a line in my book, which is forgiveness is overrated. So there is this sort of whole forgiveness industry out there that kind of implies one should forgive everybody everything. And that actually is not true. That's not a good template. And one of the things that I learned is that in a lot of ways you want to be much more nuanced and careful about when you give an apology and when you forgive. So, I mean, I've actually done a couple pieces on it. In fact, I recently did a Washington Post piece on when you should not forgive. And I quoted experts on there are times when forgiving somebody is bad for your health. So for example, there's a woman in the book whose father sexually assaulted her when she was 13 years old, and through a clergy at their church, really pushed to keep the family together and pushed her to accept his apology and to forgive him. And then a few years later, he tried to do it again. And when I interviewed her at 40, she basically posthumously unforgave him. And that was very powerful. For her, that was very empowering. And I interviewed a therapist, Dr. Ramani Durvasula, who wrote a book called It's Not You, How to Identify and Heal from Narcissistic People. And she actually had some really smart arguments about how there's a certain type person, certain type relationship where they always repeat their offense. So if you forgive them and then they do it again, then basically you're worse off. So what I learned is that it's very nuanced, and that not only should you not forgive everybody everything, sometimes self-protection is the sort of basis of health and well-being. So I guess there's a part of me that, when somebody does something wrong, I really look at the specific scenario and decide, what happened and how do I feel and is this dangerous for me? And interestingly too, the question that I asked in the book was, can I forgive somebody without an apology? And there actually are ways to forgive someone without an apology. And in my mind, I think I finally was going to try to forgive my addiction specialist without the apology. And what I realized was that you could forgive somebody and never see them again or never have anything to do with them again. So part of me thought, based on maybe his past kindness or, a good 15 years, maybe I could forgive him and move on. And then just when I was about to do that, then he did come clean and gave me a full-fledged explanation and apology that made a huge difference. But anyway, so it was interesting to me that I did figure out a way to forgive him, but it was a different kind of forgiveness, because if somebody can't admit they did something wrong, then the chances are they're just going to do it again. And so it would be kind of dangerous for you to accept them back into your life. So I learned, all kinds of nuances of, when you forgive and also when is it a real apology? I had a rabbi, Joseph Krako in Michigan. He had something really interesting to say, which is he doesn't think it's a real apology, even if you get the full-fledged approach. He doesn't think it's a real apology unless someone is in the exact same situation again and they do it differently the next time. Like you really have to learn from the mistake and not repeat it. And most people don't.
So, what do you think about grudges? You said you didn't become a more forgiving person. Do you think a grudge is okay?
I think a grudge can be self-protective, and I think your goal isn't to exonerate every single person who does horrible things to you. Your goal is to protect yourself and be happy and healthy. So I think that if somebody is dangerous or can't apologize or is incapable of the kind of relationship you want, I think it can be very healthy to have a grudge. In fact, I interview Manny Mandel, who's a Holocaust survivor, who says that he thrived in life out of spite.
Mm.
And I think there are people that do that. And also there was a Bosnian Muslim war survivor, Kenan Tribincevic, who I've written co-authored 2 books with, and he felt the same way. Like there was never an official apology for what the Christian Orthodox Serbs did to the Bosnian Muslim people, mass murder, genocide. So his attitude was never forget, never forgive. He did find other ways to move on. So there can be often many, many healthy ways to move on without getting an official apology or without getting the official apology that you want. So I focused on that, so sometimes in a lot of the stories I focused on, so how do you heal? How do you move on from trauma or from a wrong that's been done to you if you don't get the apology and the reparation that you want?
I would love to hear the religious nuances. What religion had your favorite take on forgiveness?
Well, what I found interesting was that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity actually seem to be very similar. I mean, so at first Christianity seemed to be more pushing you towards the forgiveness, because I remember I spoke with the Reverend about the line, Jesus's line, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. So I thought, is that sort of a blanket forgiveness? And so at first it seemed like it was, but then I spoke with another Reverend who said, okay, on one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, if you look at the concept of hell and heaven and purgatory in Christianity, you'll see that if you don't repent your sins, you basically burn in hell forever. So it was kind of interesting that on one hand, I thought with Christianity that there's more of a forgiveness, but not really, because the consequences of not atoning for your sins are you go to hell. So, but it was interesting. So basically, I mean, I'm not a religious expert, but basically what the people that were experts were telling me was that in the three Abrahamic religions, that really apologizing and forgiveness and atonement were extremely important to the whole process. So there really wasn't a blanket forgiveness. There was more of a, if you atone for your sins, then you can be forgiven and the sins are erased. But if you don't, that's a big problem. And interestingly, I had a doctor who was Hindu born who had kind of a very Hinduistic take on the whole scenario, which was when I told him the whole story, he said, there is something in this picture that you can't see. And I said, what do you mean? With the addiction doctor. And he said, he gave me the metaphor of there's a woman in a SUV who stops her car abruptly in the middle of the street, and the driver in the back is honking and doesn't know what the hell she's doing, getting something in her back seat. And what he can't see is that her infant is choking. And so that was really interesting, because it turned out that was very apt, because when my therapist did come back and apologize, it turned out that there was a lot of illness and a big medical problem in his family that he was unable to cope with. So there really was something that I couldn't see. And that seemed to be along the lines of the Buddhist attitude too. I think Hindu and Buddhism seem to be a little more about not being able to see the bigger picture, and sort of how small we are getting caught up in things that we don't understand. So yeah, so it was interesting, so it was kind of fascinating to talk to different experts and to sort of get different advice and opinions.
Yeah, I see why you got obsessed with it, for sure. Hey, privates, before we wrap this episode up, just a friendly reminder that August is Marie Mer month on Private Parts Unknown, and that is because August is hot as hell and y'all need some lingerie to match, okay? This is the ultimate treat yourself moment. If you like sexy ass lingerie as much as I do, and I do love it, Marie Mer is got you covered, okay? They've got BDSM and bondage-inspired leather and latex and fishnets and bodysuits. It is going to make you feel just like a sexy, slutty goddess, which is how I want to feel, okay? And it is guaranteed to spice up your sex life. So head on over to mariemer.com. Just use the link in the episode description and use code PRIVATE to save 15% off. So privates, I hope I don't have anything to apologize to you all for. I've just been trying to serve you. But I think it was really helpful that we could all learn how to say I'm sorry today, right? A little bit better. And that's what life's all about, right? Just getting a little bit better every day. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Private Parts Unknown. Stay tuned right here, because I've got another sexy episode coming your way next week. For the latest episodes, look down and make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast player now. To stay in touch between episodes, follow me at Courtney Kosak, that is Kocaak, on Instagram and Twitter. And follow the show at Private Parts Unknown on Instagram and at Private Parts on Twitter. And hey, privates, I am shamelessly trying to hit the top 1% on OnlyFans always and forever. So if you are interested in a Playboy-style peek behind the podcast, you can subscribe to my OnlyFans account at onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. It is a very horny way to help support the show. So if you are interested, join me on onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. And of course, subscribe to our newsletter at privatepartsunknown.substack.com. There is a link for that in the episode description. And subscribe to the Private Parts Unknown YouTube channel for the video version of a bunch of episodes. The audio episodes also automatically update over there now. So head on over to youtube.com/privatepartsunknown and smash that subscribe button. Again, that is youtube.com/privatepartsunknown. And check out my other podcasts for more of my audio creations. I have The Bleeders about book writing and publishing, and Podcast Bestie, which is a best friend to podcasters trying to grow and monetize their shows. And if you are a writer and you not only want to generate a ton of new material, but get it published, like my viral essay for Cosmo that I did a reading of a few episodes back, I have got the writing intensive of your dreams going down in September. It is called Back to School Pitch Party. And I actually wrapped up the first cohort in July, and my students were wildly productive. They wrote between 27,000 and 40,000 words, and they've started getting bylines from places like the Huffington Post. Seriously, it was incredible. So if you are interested, head on over to my website. It is CourtneyKosak.com/teaching. Again, Courtney Kosak, last name KOCAK.com/teaching, and you can use code PRIVATE for $100 off. Shout out to Amy Rausch for the bomb-ass theme music. For more info about Amy and her music, check out amyrausch.com. That is Amy, RAASCH.com. This episode was mixed by my beloved audio guy, Michael Castaneda of Plastic Audio. And after enjoying this content, could we ask you for a quick favor? Just go to ratethispodcast.com/private and give us a 5-star rating and review. Here's the deal. I am trying to hit #1 on the sexuality charts before I go out with a book proposal sort of related to this show, and you can help me do that. So if you are listening on Spotify, just go to our page, click the 3 dots, it's called the hamburger sign, click rate show, and click all 5 stars, and voila, you have just made my day. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Castbox, you can of course rate and review the show right in the app. And no matter where you are listening, you can rate and review the podcast by going to ratethispodcast.com/private and leaving a 5-star rating and review. I would love to get a few new ratings and reviews. I will read those reviews on the air, so hit me, baby. And there is one more way you can help support the show. We are now on the Fountain app. So if you are listening on Fountain or another V4V platform and you get value from this show, you can support us by sending a boostagram. You can even send a comment along with your boost. And I have to say, those are my favorite messages to get because they come with a little bit of Bitcoin. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Love you, privates.